Welcome to Between the Before and After, a podcast about the stories that shape us. I'm your host, Coach John McLernan, and each episode I bring you an inspiring guest with a moving story that shines a light on the power of the human spirit. Before we dive in, I want to let you know about two very important things. Number one, the stories shared here are often gritty, raw, and vulnerable, and very likely will include speaking about sensitive topics suited for a mature audience. Number two, this podcast is also broadcast live on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So on whatever platform you follow myself or Freedom Nutrition Coaching, you have the opportunity to participate in this discussion during the live stream. And we encourage your participation both by commenting and asking questions. And so this podcast is about exploring the stories that take place between the before and after photos, not just in the realm of weight loss, but in all areas of life. So let's dive in. All right, tonight we're chatting with Kirby. And Kirby, where are you coming at us from?
Hey, John, thanks for having me. I am coming out of Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City, Missouri, whichever one you want to say.
It's kind of
the Kansas City metro region. Yeah, it's like
kind of
split
split
down
over
the middle.
state lines.
Yeah, so it's right in the middle there, the Kansas-Missouri border, but there's a river that separates the two. So some people say Kansas City, Kansas. Some say Kansas City, Missouri.
Is there any kind of rivalry between like Missouri and Kansas State in that regard? Like the city belongs to us?
Yeah. Or... not really. I would say, the difference that I've seen, at least my perspective is that the Missouri side is more of a business district.
Okay.
It's where downtown's at. That's where the West Bottom's at, the railroad, a lot of that stuff. And then, on the western side, which is the Kansas side, there's more of the entertainment piece, the casinos, the racetracks, the shopping, and so it's just a little bit different districts. I would say if there's any rivalries, it's the counties. The counties like to be a little Johnson County versus Wyandotte County, or this and that.
Yeah.
It's little local rivalries. But other than that, I mean, the big rivalry would be Missouri State Tigers I'm sorry, not Missouri State, University of Missouri Tigers, and then the KU Jayhawks. So.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, university or varsity sports down there in the U.S. are quite a big deal. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what are you up to these days? Before we dive into your story, I like to learn a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so actually, it's quite interesting. I'm kind of going through a little bit of a transition phase right now, as far as what I'm doing. I'm actually coming out of an internship where I worked with a company called Catalyzer for the last 3 months. I took an opportunity to work for a coaching and training company, small business. Recently went out and worked with the sheriff's department and stuff like that. And teaching them leadership foundations. And now, as I exit this, I'm going into a something that's very purposeful for me, which kind of relates to my story. A program called Fathers in the Field. It's a national ministry. And basically what they do is that would be a regional field missionary where I work with in a few different states and go in and help work with leadership teams, pastors, and other members of the community on building programs for fatherless boys through their curriculum that they have devised to kind of help with that deep wound that these boys have from the abandonment of their earthly fathers, and point them towards their heavenly father. So, which is kind of really interesting because I grew up fatherless. So, my purpose is finally becoming realized after 26 and a half years in the military. So,
right. Yeah. You've taken your pain and turned it into purpose, which I think is something quite remarkable. It's really interesting when the door opens to that. So, we're definitely going to dive into your story, but I like to pull a card out of my my deck of random cards here. And I think this one actually really fits. And it is, what were you most afraid of as a child?
Oh, wow. Probably the thing that I was most afraid of as a child. That's actually a really good story. Not succeeding. I would say that was probably the one. Most of us that grew up without a father, I would tell you, you were always competing against the man on our left or right, or the boy on your left or right, depending on what stage of life you're in. And you feel like you have to prove yourself to have value in the world and to have worth.
Yeah.
And so me not succeeding, probably that was a good portion of it. But the other part is that I had this grandfather that showed up in my life very early. And then we can get into that story as well. But he showed up in my life and he had been there, every week he checked in on me, made sure I was okay. Did a lot of things that not having a father he did for me. And so as I grew up, I never wanted to disappoint him, and I wanted to be successful. And people are like, "Who's your hero?" Superman, Batman, Aquaman, whatever. I was like, my grandfather was my hero, and that was the guy that if there was any person in the world I wanted to make proud, that was the guy. And I was always afraid of disappointing him. Even when I did disappoint him, he'd give me that look, and it was just a crushing blow. So he didn't have to say a word, didn't spank my butt or anything. He was just like, "I heard what you did, and I'm disappointed." And I'm just like, "Oh, it was just crushing for me."
Yeah, it's quite remarkable when we have a figure like that in our lives. Well, I guess I'm a little bit curious, mention, because if that's a fear, it's like, what, usually when we have a fear, there's a fear of a certain consequence, or like something is going to happen if this takes place. What was that fear for you? Like, how did it show up?
Well, if there is a fear, is always the fear of never being good enough, right? Never having what it takes. And that was where I kind of go back to the worth and value. How that showed up was in my aggressiveness and my very assertiveness and my desire to, well, I shouldn't say desire, but need to overcome challenges and obstacles that were in my way. If I felt like I was being challenged, I would pursue that challenge relentlessly. Until if it boiled down to my knuckles being bloody, I would not quit, because I was not going to be that guy. I was not going to be a quitter, and I was not going to be defeated. And I wasn't going to let anybody else look down upon me either, because I was a survivor, and I had to survive because I didn't have two parents in the home, and growing up in a trailer park, low income housing, that's rough for a kid. And you're going to have to roll up your sleeves sometimes, and you have to get some things done. And so I pretty much, probably about the age of 12, 13, 14, I started kind of figuring the world out on my own and exploring that. And older boys were raising me, and, I was looking up to them and figuring out, what I had to do to survive. My mother had smaller children, so her focus was there, while I had to kind of figure out, how am I going to get through what's next for me? Like, how am I going to survive? Where's my, and I wouldn't say where my next meal is going to come from, because she provided for us, but, what's the turn of the corner? Like, what am I going to make of myself? So I didn't really have all that mentoring. I kind of had to stumble across all that, figure it out.
Yeah. And so are you the oldest of your mother's children?
Yeah, I'm the oldest of four.
Okay.
I have many more stepbrothers and siblings. I had 3 stepfathers growing up, so it's kind of a rough home. In and out of different places all the time. But I have 3 half brothers, sisters, and probably about 4 or 5 stepbrothers and sisters. So
so a lot of people, in a sense, are family to you. But you're the oldest out of all of those.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And so, you said fatherless is a big part of the picture. Was your father ever in the picture, or?
No, he was never in the picture. So, what happened, I could kind of tell you the story a little bit. My mother grew up in a pretty decent home, lived up in Peoria, Illinois. Her dad had gotten out of the Navy, had some cash in his pocket, doing pretty well. It was the 50s, 60s, and lost his job. And, at a distillery of all places. And so had to move back home to a small town of about 800 people. Back then it was about 2,000. Today it's probably like 400 to 800 now. But, the coal mines were gone. Most of the opportunities in that town were gone. Moved back in with his family. Small home. He had 7 kids that he was trying to raise, and, was driving to St. Louis, which was, 2 hours away every day, working 12-hour shifts, and just was gone 6-7 days a week working. And the family felt under some hard times, and that struck her really hard, and she began to rebel and walk on that side of the tracks for a while. And one night after she graduated high school, she went to a party, and she was involved in a drug and alcohol-induced sexual assault, and I was conceived of that. And so I don't know who my father is. My mother doesn't know who my father is. they have this thing in the sexual assault arena, which I have some experience in that area, having worked as a sexual assault coordinator for the Army, and an instructor for the Army in this category. But they call it blacked out, passed out, where you can't remember what happened to you because of, the drugs and alcohol. And it's a sexual assault. And when someone can't consent or, agree to what's about to happen, it's wrong. And so that would happen. And she went like 3 months without telling nobody. She woke up the next morning, left the place, realized what happened. Didn't tell nobody, kept the secret to herself. And from there, what happened is that she finally had to tell him, right? Because she knew that she was pregnant. She right? And so she went in and she confirmed the test, and she told her parents that she was pregnant, and she let them believe what they wanted, right? You can imagine when you don't tell them everything, they begin to fill in the gaps. They just know you're pregnant, and the rest of it was history. So there were some unpleasant conversations. She wasn't, the saint of the family. And so she had it pretty rough. Her parents didn't talk to her the remainder of the pregnancy. And that's where my grandfather kind of comes into play, is because, she was, treated with silence. And eventually, the day I was born, my grandmother drove my mother, remember, this is 40 some years ago. So she had to drive her 45 minutes to the hospital. There wasn't a hospital in every town. So,
right.
That takes a while to get there, in the early spring of April. But so she drove her to the hospital and didn't even get out of the car. Just didn't even open the door. Just said, okay, here you go. She got out, walked in the emergency room. Nurse helped her out. And then my grandfather ended up, once my grandmother arrived back home, got in the car and drove back to the hospital and sat out at the waiting room right outside until I was born. And then when I was born, went in. And basically that was it. I mean, he was a huge part of my life after that, ever since then. And in that moment, he forgave my mother for whatever happened. He never knew. She never even told me until after he was passed. And so he never knew what had really happened to his daughter and the circumstances around any of that. But I'm sure that, he would have still have forgiven her no matter what, because he knew that boy, needed a father. Or a father figure in his life. And to be honest with you, he lost his dad when he was 9 years old. So to natural causes. So you can kind of see, this fatherlessness start to, generation after generation after generation. So it does have a huge impact on boys in America today.
And I hear a story like that, and of course we're hearing it in hindsight in the 21st century, compared to back then. And, my heart just like aches hearing that, like hearing all of it, really. Like, I just think about your mom and like what she would have went through and what she would have had to carry with her as a kind of as a secret, and the shame and the guilt and all these things. There was nothing to be nothing to really, I think, for her to be forgiven of, in a sense. But I guess given the social circumstances of the time, like she didn't feel that it was her place to express that, I guess.
Well, it's a different time frame. I mean, having had taught in the United States Army's, Sexual Harassment Assault Response and Prevention Academy, one of the modules that we teach is about history of victim advocacy. And the year that I was born, there was only 3 rape crisis centers in the United States: St. Louis, D.C., and San Francisco. That was it.
Wow.
And so when you think about it, we have come so far from there. So the support, the resources, the community, it just wasn't there back then. That's why, I look at what happened, and I'm like, man, we have come so far since then, and we have so much further to go still. But, I'm grateful that, my mother made the decisions that she made, and she told me, she's like, you're a blessing. You probably saved my life, and so that feels good. Right. And actually we just had that conversation the other day, and she repeated that to me. So, but so it's good to feel that way. So,
to feel that out of like horrific and traumatic and difficult circumstances, that there's a blessing that came from that, it's, and, I'm sure, especially now you look back, and I'm sure you do everything you can for her as well, knowing that, she did the best she could in incredibly difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
So you grew up kind of with a sense of like you said, worthlessness and needing
Mhm.
to prove yourself relentlessly.
Yeah.
Did that lead to you finding yourself into trouble or into conflict or things like that?
Yeah, for sure, all the time. I was probably the center of conflict, or I created the conflict. A lot of boys do this, out of despair. They don't have a father. They have to prove themselves. They're lost, they're lonely, they're mad, they're angry. They have this deep, anger wound in their soul. And so, yeah, I would, one little thing would happen, and I'm like, okay, let's fight.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna bloody you up, buddy. You're not gonna, and it was probably the slightest thing. Um, but yeah, there was always conflict. I had a couple cousins and an uncle that were about 2 years older than me, and so they were kind of like my bodyguards, and they
okay,
protected me, and so we were real close, young, and so I would pick fights, and then when people weren't around, when they were around, people would leave me alone because there was more of them, and I remember one day running, back to the school after recess and trying to get back in the building, and well, it caught up to me because one of those kids ran up behind me and smashed my head off the window as I was trying to
oh,
get into the building, and that was a lesson, right? Be careful who you pick on, and don't be picking fights just to be picking fights or be picking at people. And so you start to slowly figure out, okay, like this is not the right behavior, but that's kind of where that. You have those figures in your life that kind of shift you around a little bit and say, okay, this isn't going to work. And those are those life lessons you begin to learn, and sometimes with the hard lessons. So
yeah, yeah, you came out of it all right.
yeah.
I always kind of wonder about this. If ever you encountered people later in life that maybe you would have had a scrap with, back
Oh
in the
yeah.
day. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's people I've worked with in most organizations, and I'm just like, they get me to a point, right? And this
yeah,
is something most of us have to work on anyway, is where I'm red in the face, I feel the frustration, I feel my blood boiling, and I just want to fight them, right? And I'm like, you know what? Somebody just needs to, beat on you. And I'm like, nope, that's not how we do this today, and it's okay, but you learn to control the rage, right? You learn to control the
yeah,
anger. You take the emotions that we're experiencing, you begin to learn to process those.
mm,
That's something that boys without fathers don't know how to do. um, they don't have that
yeah,
father to pull them aside and say, hey man, like, look, I get it, you're upset, you punched the kid in the face, because he took your truck,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
not okay, you know and but we begin to learn to process those emotions a little bit. We brought and take those emotions and do something productive with them, right?
Yeah.
And that is, if anybody knows anything about the human brain, right? The first thing that the sensors go to is you know, that the part of your brain that controls the emotions, that fight, or flees. So you're making an instantaneous decision on what you're going to do,
Hmm.
and then the rest of those signals travel to the prefrontal cortex, which
Yeah,
you
for
got that
some.
more of that executive decision making, like, let's think about that before I do that,
Yeah,
and so yeah, so sometimes our first, especially someone who's experienced trauma, their first reaction is to fight, flight, or freeze,
yeah.
and that's what happens to a lot of us. That's where we're programmed to respond in a certain way, and so you
Mm,
just have to learn
mm.
how to handle that and deal with it.
I've heard it said that emotions are an action blueprint. And I thought that's a really
Mhm.
interesting way to look at it, because
Mhm.
there are times when we need to act without executive function.
Mhm.
When it's a life and death situation, there isn't time to stop and smell,
Yeah,
smell the breeze and sort of look around and
yeah,
get a piece of paper and a pen out and
yeah,
chart a course. Like there isn't time for that, so you have to
yeah,
act right away.
yeah.
But sometimes, could we say those action blueprints maybe get laid down get wired in like in an improper way, and as a result leads to you taking actions that
Mhm.
are maybe regretful down the road.
Yeah, I mean, one of the places where those reactions are positive, or, I mean, not necessarily positive, but, a good exercise or practice of them would be if I was in combat in Iraq, I'm not going to stop and like, let me think about that for a minute. No, get down now. It's,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
let's go, get in the
yeah.
truck. Let's go. Now we're out of here. It's just, you're not going, those things, they're, and some of those things are trained in you, right? Those are
Mm,
developed, those the repetition, and that's one of the things I loved about the military was just the discipline, right?
yeah.
The repetition, the muscle movement, um or muscle memory, where you just went over and over and over again until it just became natural.
Yeah.
So
Did you join the military right out of high school?
Yeah, I was actually joined when I was about 17 years old. I kind of knew from an early age. I think I was about 12 or 14 years old when my grandparents started talking to me about that. And this is where my grandfather and my grandmother, uh, basically was kind of influencing me at this time. And they knew I was involved in some drugs and alcohol. I was smoking. I was doing all kinds of stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Again, I was hanging around the wrong people and involved with the wrong crowds. And that's because I just didn't have a father and
Yeah.
to kind of steer me in the right direction. And so I was doing that. And they said, hey, look, if you don't go in the military, there's probably nothing here for you. Um, you know, and my grandfather told me, he's like, the only thing I regretted after leaving the Navy after 4 years was, um, get not wanting to get off that ship or wanting to get off that ship, I should say. And the reason why that was is he just wanted off the command ship. He was tired of all the ceremonies, the parades, all the
Right,
foreign dignitaries coming on the ship, and all these pompous circumstances, and it's like I just got tired of it. He's like, I told him to put me on any fleet in the ship or any ship on the fleet, and they wouldn't do it. And they said, well, you either stay on the command ship or you get out. And he's like, fine, I'll get out. And that's when he went and met my grandmother and stuff. But he said, I regretted kind of making that decision. Not that I regret meeting your grandmother and having this family, but he's like, It was kind of a silly reason to get out, He goes, I love the Navy. I love the camaraderie. I loved everything about the culture in the military. I have a lot of respect for it. He just said, I was just in that. I was a young man and I just made a dumb decision. I thought about that, and I thought about all the things that he said. And look, in my town where I was growing up, there was a glass factory and a brake factory, and both of them were shutting down. That's about 800 jobs in a town of 7,000 people. And the only thing that was left there was a prison. And either you're on the inside or you're watching through the window.
Right.
So I didn't want to do that. So I had applied to the prison, but I was like, you know what? This isn't for me. I'm out of here. And I went and joined the military to get away. And I ended up staying in the Midwest my entire career. So all of it, about 8 years, I stayed in the Midwest. So whether it be Indiana, Kansas, Missouri, I was never far from home. So my idea of leaving from home and traveling never really transpired. So
So you joined the military. What trade or what? Because you sort of explained what you did in the military, but I'm not sure. Did you start out in that role, or what role did you start out?
I didn't. Yeah, no, it was kind of interesting. I always tell this story when I talk to my coaching clients because I work with quite a few folks that are in the service, and I tell them, about when I initially joined, and I wanted to join the infantry, and I wanted to shoot bad guys in the face, right? That fit me really well, and go out and take my frustrations out on the enemy, and it didn't work out that way. I got to the what they call the military entrance processing station. And I did the eye exam and I was colorblind. And they said, well, you can't do that job because you're colorblind. And did you know that? And I'm like, well, my great grandfather was colorblind. So I said, I don't know. He was in the infantry. I thought I could be in, but that was World War II. So a little different back then.
Yeah.
And so they said, well, we'll give you three options. They said legal, finance, or HR. And I said, I don't want to be messing with nobody's money because I don't want to get in no more fights. And I don't want to put anybody in jail. I've already been in enough trouble with the law. So, and then the third one was HR. And I was like, well, how long is that school? And they said 5 weeks. It means 5 weeks. I still got half my summer left. I come back and drink with my buddies. And that's the decision I made. Very shallow decision, but I was like, I'm just going to be an HR guy. And I just wanted in. I just wanted out of the community. And that's what happened. It was a great opportunity. I got to do a lot of fun stuff. I worked for the Inspector General. I got to do some postal operations. I did a lot of stuff with HR. Met a lot of great people, a lot of great leaders. Learned a lot about how to treat people, how to do customer service, how to follow up, just in building relationships.
Yeah, I wonder if the military kind of played a bit of a father-like role with some discipline and some structure and sort of filled that spot that you didn't have in your life.
Yeah, I would say, the first guy I ever met, when I went on my first boss was named Harlan Evans. He was an old Vietnam vet, got out for a while and then came back. And so he was a pretty good mentor in the military, teaching me my job, giving me opportunities. And then I left the National Guard and I went on active duty in the Army full time, when I turned 18. And when I got to Fort Riley, Kansas, I met this guy named Johnny J. Eves, and I was like, oh boy, here we go. I took one look at him and sized him up, and he was sizing me up, and I thought we were in for it. And but I will tell you, that was probably the greatest mentor I've had in my entire life. He, you know, I just, you know, he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and he showed that to me. I had a good work ethic already because I grew up on a farm. I did a lot of farming work when I was in high school and junior high, and you know, I just put my head down. I worked hard. I kept my mouth shut. I just did my job. I went home. You know, eventually we started having conversations, but you know, he took me to buy my first car. We went fishing, catfishing together. We had some pretty interesting conversations. He shared some personal things with me. I shared some personal things with him. He took me to watch his jazz band play. You know, and there was just some stuff like that, and we stayed in contact with each other. And I had a lot of loyalty built up to him. Because the next guy that came in to replace him, I couldn't stand the guy. I wanted to fight him too, because he wanted to change everything about what Johnny did in our organization.
Isn't that what
Johnny,
happens like in the military and bureaucracy? It's like, hey, now that I'm here, I got to make my mark. You know.
Yeah. I'm going to change everything, and I'm like, you're not changing nothing. Like, this works, you know. And so I felt, for me, it felt like he was trying to erase him. And see, you know, as a guy trying to erase someone that I looked up to and I valued, you know, I'd already been abandoned 4 times by stepfathers and other men in my life. And so, like, when you're trying to erase something that was good for me, now we're fighting again. And I ended up looking the guy across the, you know, we were sitting at a table and he was giving me some counseling because I was misbehaving, showing up late for work, just really didn't want to be there anymore. And I told myself, look, you can kick me out of the Army if you want, I don't care. And so the second mentor figure in my life, Ronald Forgy, came along, and he said, you know, I knew you before this other guy came along. He goes, I knew how you acted, how you behaved. I know your character. He's like, do me a favor. He's like, if I can get the recruiter or the retention guy to give you any assignment or any job that you want in the Army, you know, not job, but assignment, what would that be? And if I can get that for you, would you stay in for 4 more years and, you know, just give it another shot and get to see another side of the Army? And so I said, yeah, I'll do that. And I thought I was going to be a smart guy, right? Because you know, one of my grandmothers, we always grew up watching the History Channel, and we would always talk about going to Egypt and seeing the pyramids and stuff. And I said, well, if you can give me a job to Egypt, I'll go. Well, guess what? The Army has a unit in the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. I had no idea. And so I got the job, and I was like, well, I'm a man of my word. You know, you wrote me into that one. And so I ended up re-enlisting and stayed for 4 more years. And then it turned into 26. So it worked out well.
So you ended up getting deployed to Egypt.
Yeah. So I spent a year in Egypt. So in the Sinai Peninsula, working with the multinational force of observers. So
how was that? Did you enjoy that?
Yeah. Yeah, I did a lot.
I imagine you would have had some like ideas around what it was. You're like, okay, fine. You gave me that thing that I said that I wanted, so now I'm going to go there. And then you get there, and I'm always interested to see if it like meets expectations. You know.
Well, it was kind of a culture shock a little bit. I've never been out of the United States, let alone Illinois or Kansas. I mean, you know, you're thinking farm country agriculture. You know, so it's kind of a culture shock. Flying into Cairo. Well, you know, I get there, you know, you get on like a 6 or 7 hour bus ride to the Sinai Peninsula to where the camp was at. It's a 5 mile square camp. All there is a dining facility, a movie theater, and a library to rent books. And so I got a lot of education while I was there because they would fly people in and do classes and stuff like that. But that's where I met a gentleman. Last name was Tony. He's Tony Bond Sr. is his last name. And he had a conversation with me about my career, and that's when the career development conversation. So another man that entered my life and just started to guide me along the way. And you know, just, well, why aren't you taking colleges? Why aren't you doing this? Why don't you do that? You know, I don't know how to do any of this stuff. It's like, I don't know nothing about the system. He's like, you're an HR guy. I said, yeah, but I was only an HR guy for 2 years. I never did promotions. I don't know how any of this works. I did awards and evaluations. And so I had only done an aspect of my job. And so he showed me, he sat me down, he showed me, he said, you need to do this, this, and this. And I ended up, you know, doing very well. And when I left there, I ended up having gotten enough points to get promoted. What was interesting about that place is when I went over there, it was May of 2000. And
Okay.
so I came back, and September 11th had occurred while I was there. So I was in the middle of the
Uh,
Sinai Peninsula in Arab country when the Twin Towers fell. That was a shock coming back.
no
That's when
kidding.
kind of service and purpose of to country, my commitment really was important to me after that. It took on
Yeah.
a whole new role. And, when somebody says, hey, are you going to continue to serve? I was like, yep. There was no thinking twice about it. So, going from, and I probably, yeah, so the towers fell about September 2011, and I came back about May. I'm sorry, I said 2011, 2001.
2001. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
came back in May 2002, so I got over there in May of 2001, and came back in May of 2002. So,
So when you were over in Egypt, I imagine at some point you might have had a bit of time off, and did you go and explore
mhm.
like the
Yeah,
pyramids complex and these sort of things that like
yeah.
a lot of people want to see?
Yeah, so I explored the pyramids. I did the Nile River tours. How they measured the Nile River, the Nile meter, and stuff like that. I went to Cairo, the museums. Got to see a lot of amazing things. Cairo is a pretty cool place. I really began to enjoy my time over in Israel. Um,
Yeah.
I got to go to a lot, Masada, the Dead Sea, the Red Sea, and just do a bunch of cool stuff like that. See a little bit of history. The beginning of civilization over there, and just things that I would have never seen in my entire life. And I got the opportunity to see those. And that's kind of when kind of reinvigorated that passion for history and
Mm-hmm.
understanding some of these, more ancient civilizations and how they survived, and how they got water up the mountain here, and
Yeah.
how they
Yeah.
survived on Masada for all that time. And that really became curious to me. I also found a passion for diving, because once I found the Red Sea, I was like, that was one of the most beautiful places I'd seen. So I really began to snorkel and scuba dive down there. So
That's awesome. And I think one of the recurring themes that I sort of keep hearing coming up is
mhm.
like mentor figures entering
Yeah.
your life.
Hmm.
And were you looking for this, or was this a matter of like someone comes into your life and it fits the role and a relationship starts?
Yeah, no, it just it's just men coming in your life and making deposits, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's all it
Yeah.
was, is people just making deposits in the bank. They see someone in need and they just stop, like, oh, well, this guy looks a little bit lost or misguided. And the military was great for that, right? There's a lot of us that go in the military, they're not well off.
Yeah.
The standards are pretty low these days, about who they let in, who they don't. Some people would consider it a social military welfare system nowadays. Um, I would argue that those are some of America's brightest and best people. Just because they come from different circumstances doesn't make them any less of anything else.
Hmm.
But the challenge with that, for me at least, is that these people, I was kind of in that. I didn't know what to do next, so I would do nothing,
Hmm.
and people would see me, just kind of stagnant, just kind of drifting, and they would pick up on that. That happened when I was in high school a couple times. I had a shop teacher and a wrestling coach that made deposits in my life to kind of get me moving forward again. Um, and honestly, most of these men, were good Christian, godly men, and I didn't even know it at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Reflecting back and having conversations with them later on, it was just that for them, it was their duty. One of the scriptures that is important to me that I talk about a lot is that the Son of Man didn't come to be served; he came to serve. And so
Hmm.
that's how I see a lot of these men. They came to serve others and not necessarily serve themselves.
Yeah.
Because they
Yeah.
didn't brag. They were like, "Hey, look
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
did! I helped this guy out." It was just, they were
Yeah.
doing a drive by, saw somebody in need, had a conversation, saw somebody that was down. They would just
Yeah.
take the time out of their schedules to give something to someone else. So,
And there's something to be said for when we live for something that's bigger than ourselves, life
mhm.
feels more meaningful.
Oh
And
yeah,
one of the concerns that maybe I have, just kind of observing
mhm.
the direction society is going. Maybe we always look at the every generation looks at the next one coming up and goes, "Uh oh, look what this one's getting into," But I really, especially with the rise of social media, I think of
Mhm.
the rise of sort of self-centeredness in a way that maybe has never been there before, because it encourages us to put ourselves online for validation from other
Mhm.
people and really become sort of self-absorbed.
Yeah.
but so this has led you to a place where you feel like, hey, you know what, I grew up without a
Yeah.
father. There was kind of sort of this hole in
Mhm.
my life. There's people that stepped in and filled that role
Mhm.
in one capacity or another for periods of time through my life. And so now I want to be able to give back as a result
Yeah.
of that, and that's led you to what you're doing now.
Oh yeah, that's 100% true. I mean, that has become, my purpose. I would say, a lot of these guys, it was just by chance, that they were there. Probably divine chance, right?
Yeah.
But it's incredible to see how that happens. And most of the time, guys like me who grew up in those circumstances, we don't know to look. We don't know to ask. We
Mm-mm.
don't even know how to ask for help. Um,
Yeah.
Working with, being in the Army for so long and having worked around so many people that I knew that took their own life because they just didn't know to ask for help. And even if they did, their cries were
Mm.
unheard because people didn't recognize the signs. Um, it is a challenge for a lot of us. It's so hard just to ask for help. And a lot of these boys, they just, and some men, they just don't know how to ask for help. I'm struggling. I'm supposed to be, the pastor, the provider, the protector. I'm supposed to be all these things, right? And if I don't do those things, then society looks at me less of a man. And
Mm.
we all go through tough times. We all have difficult moments. And we want to live up to those roles, but sometimes it's just really hard, right? Because you're supposed to be a man. You're supposed to do it on your own. No, none of us do it on our own. I couldn't
Yeah.
do it on my own. I had to have a strong, solid group of men around me, healthy, godly, masculine figures that kind of lift me
Mm-hmm.
up and kind of, show me the way, and help me out. That's what a father does for you. And, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be necessarily a father, but it could
Yeah.
just be a healthy father figure or a father like figure that helps you
Mm-hmm.
through. I mean, I knew men that I've had conversations with, they were 30 and 40 years old, lost their father and felt lost. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Lost their father to old age or something like that, and it's like now there's this piece that's missing, right? We all going to go through it at some point in time.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
how do I, you just got to reach out and ask for help.
And I think you really touched on something very important there. Two aspects: one, not knowing even how to ask
Mm-hmm.
for help, and others
Mm-hmm.
around them not knowing to look for the signs of somebody who needs help. And the result of that is, because I believe the numbers are like male suicides are 3 times higher than female suicides, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's high. I mean, I could even tell you the statistics for fatherless, and it's really crazy. There's 25 million fatherless boy or children out there, right? 50% of America is growing up in a home without a father. There's 12 million boys. 72% of those boys become, or 72% of adolescent murderers are fatherless. 60% of inmates in confinement facilities are fatherless. Um, 85% of the kids in the juvenile detention homes are fatherless. And, this is the one that always gets folks too. And it's probably, more concerning because it's been recently in the news, but 75% of the mass shooters grew up without a father.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at it, the number one problem on society and probably our globe is kids growing up without a father. And it's really, really important that these kids have this father figure in their lives, or else, they become susceptible to those societal ills. And I tell folks, I got lucky because,
Right.
I could have been one of those people right then and there in those statistics. I mean, yeah, I was drinking, I was smoking, I was doing drugs, all before the age of 14 years old. I just got lucky because I had a couple people that stepped in my life at the right time and kind of helped me course correct.
Mm-hmm.
And I was probably too ignorant to fight them, and say, okay, well,
Yeah.
they know what's best for me, and I don't know because, I don't really have a pot to piss in today. And I just took their advice because that's the only advice I was given. And I appreciate that now. Looking back, I'm like, okay, like those people really cared about me and they gave you some really good, solid advice. But when you're young, it's hard to listen. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So, fatherlessness is a huge, huge, huge problem, you know,
mhm,
and there's just kind of a shifting in I think in the way that society perceives, like maybe even the family unit in general.
mhm.
Do you, is there any solution outside of like, I'm curious, I guess, what sort of solutions are sort of being put forward, and if there are
Yeah.
solutions outside of a father figure being in a child's life.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of great organizations out there, like Fathers of the Field is one of them, that come alongside and help mentor fatherless boys. You know, for us not to have fatherless kids in America is probably uh, uh, that's a tall order, right? To eliminate
Hmm.
every to for every boy to have a father. I think that the possibility is there. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a part of a program or trying to be a part of a program. But I think the possibility is there, but it is a tall order, and it probably won't happen in my lifetime.
Hmm.
Now, the solutions is to get these kids, educated and to have that healthy mentor father. That way, we can
Hmm.
break the cycle, right? And it starts with the generation. So, if you look at my grandfather's generation, it was probably about 28% of boys grew up without a father. That every generation since then, which is 3 or 4 generations ago, has increased almost by 10%, to where it's almost 50% now.
Wow.
And a
Yeah.
lot of that is the destruction of the American home, and it's easy to get divorced today. Um, you know, the men are portrayed in a bad light at times, as barbaric or toxic. Um, and but we just have to do a better job of making sure that the right people are involved in the right kids' lives.
Hmm.
And the right value system too. I think that's really important for me. That's why I'm a part of this program, right? Because I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
the engagements that these people have are really important. 2 times a month we're attending church together. One time a month we're going through some journey guide and some curriculum, and then another part of that too is uh, taking you out and participating in a hobby or an outdoor activity together. Something that
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
passionate about, that I love, and I'm sharing that with you. My high school shop teacher shared his passion with me. My high school wrestling coach shared their passion. Those became my passions because they shared those with me. And so that was
Yeah.
really, really
Yeah.
important for me. And then a service project, right? And so, that's why I like the Fathers in the Field, is because they did a service project as well. They go out and they help seniors and other members of the community, so that kid shows up and does this project alongside this mentor father, and they show that they have some value and worth. Um, and I think those are just
Hmm.
great staples, right, of a program, that really help that child, not only heal from their wounds, but also see the value that they have to offer the world, and
Yeah. Yeah.
not to find themselves in those situations with those statistics that I just read a
Yeah.
little while
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. Yeah. That's quite remarkable. Really, just the ability to help them in that way. If you were to, if you were to just condense from your sort of life
Mhm.
experience, and you've had a lot,
Mhm.
people listening to this conversation, if they were to take one kind of nugget away from this, what would you like to share with people?
Yeah, I think the one nugget I kind of mentioned earlier, is ask for help. I mean, that's as simple as it gets. I did not want to ever ask for help, and um, one of the things I learned here over the last couple of weeks, working with some of these organizations too, I'm learning how to ask people for help. Saying I need help. I need your help reaching the fatherless. I need your help, doing this. I cannot do this by myself, and we need everybody. When I was doing some prevention training in sexual harassment and sexual assault arena while I was in the Army, um, that was the one thing that I would add at the end, is that these victims, they need your help.
Yeah.
They can't do this alone. They need your support, um, and we all need someone. And so that was um, my nugget of wisdom to the victim advocates, is I was getting ready to train them for the next 6 weeks on how to do their jobs. Is that victim, you might be the only person that one person has in their life, and
Yeah.
it's really important. And they may not know how to ask for help, and so you have to learn how to understand what they need, ask the right questions, and guide them to the resources that they need to get back to where they need to be at, to have that healthy, productive life, and try to get back to some kind of normalcy after something really traumatic has happened. Because, obviously that was important to me because it happened to my mother. And then also, fatherlessness, because that's my origin story as well. So.
Yeah. Just teaching people to ask for help, I think is so powerful, and then making it okay, not only okay, but I think almost, I really wish that we'd celebrate when people put up their hand and say, "I need help." That would just be incredible to say.
Just raise your hand. I need help.
Just raise your hand and say, "I need help." There's something admirable about reaching that place where we realize, okay, this doesn't make me lesser of a person when I reach out and ask for help. In fact, we all learn from other people, and we grow when we ask for help.
Yeah, there's a guy I was working with in this internship company I was working with not so long ago. He would call people humans, and at first I kind of like, all right, I don't know how to take that, but he would, humans here, humans there, these humans over here, and I was like, okay, are you from outer space or something? Like, you're calling us humans? And then he kind of took the human. I felt at the beginning for me, it was taking the humanity out of it. Working with in the Army and having seen so many people take their own life, and knowing those people and personally knowing them, that's what and I had a good friend. His name was Joel Rodriguez. That when I was at Fort Riley, that first duty station, he went and suffered for years and years and years from PTSD. And I just wish he would have called me up and said, "Hey, man, I need some help," because I would have been there in a heartbeat. So we've lost some really, really great people, and that's why I say, everybody's valued. Everybody has value. Everybody has worth, and so if you're struggling, you just got to ask for help.
Yeah. Well, Kirby, I really, really appreciate you coming on tonight, and I appreciate just your willingness to share what is a really, really difficult story as well. And I think that willingness to share is what encourages other people to have the courage to step up and say, I need some help, and there's value even in sharing my story and taking the pain of my story and turning it into a sense of purpose. So I really just applaud you for doing that, and I appreciate you taking the time to be on here tonight.
Hey, thank you, John. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Before and After. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, or leave a review, because that helps this podcast to reach and inspire more people. I love exploring the stories that take place between the before and after, the powerful experiences that shape who we become. And I love human potential. I love the possibilities that lie within us. So whatever you may be up against, I hope these stories inspire you, because if you're still here, your story's not done yet, so keep moving forward.
Anyone can come from any place of brokenness and destitution and build an amazing life.